You're listening in on an animated discussion about the new Batman adventures with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Double Talk. Joshua, I feel like if I weren't careful, I could very easily double talk the conversation we had on previous episodes about Scarface, because there's a lot of familiar content here, one could say.
They do walk over some oft-tread paths for these characters. Yes, it's true. But I feel like they do it in a different enough way, and we definitely get like an actual ending for the character, so I'm sort of prepared to forgive them, I guess.
Yeah, no, I actually am very willing to forgive. It's not just a rehash, although interestingly enough, they pulled a lot of storyboards from other episodes of other shows for this episode. But I will say, I think the way they approach mental illness here is different enough. And the conclusion of this character's arc, largely, as far as we can tell, is pretty positive overall. Overall, a lot more upbeat than you might expect for this type of character, so that's good news.
And not for nothing, something that's different about the new Batman adventures compared to BTAS is that we don't get a lot of psychological thrillers anymore, and this is definitely one of those.
Oh, most definitely. You feel like you are living in the head straight from the jump when we jump into the dream sequence. I know we'll get that in a moment, because I actually wanted to ask you about this character redesign, kicking off the show as we usually do.
Yeah.
A lot of the characters suffered from the streamline. There were a couple that I think benefited greatly. This one's kind of like right in the middle. I don't feel strongly one way or another. I think it still looks good, so that's a plus. It doesn't look bad.
Right. Yes, that's true. Because we've seen a couple go wrong, and these did not do that. And I feel like I can wrap Wesker, Scarface, Rhino, and Muggsy all together in one phrase: lateral move.
There we go. I like it. Lateral move. That sounds very Scarface of you. Yeah, it's not very Scarface. Make a lateral move.
Yeah, I'm getting a lateral move. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a little bit like we talked about with Bullock and stuff like that, where it's like they do a fine job adapting these characters to the new style, but they're not doing anything new or interesting or clever with them. And in this case, I think I can forgive them because we'll talk more about this when we get to the end, but I'm pretty sure this is it. We get some cameos, like just appearing in the backgrounds and stuff, but I think this is it for Wesker and Scarface, which means it's doubly it for Rhino and Muggsy, because who cares, you know?
They're literally the most generic mobsters this side of the DCAU. Nothing. I mean, they talk street talk, I guess. That's kind of nice.
Rhino's really big. He's like really big, you know? That's
and Muggsy, that's a gangster-ish name. That's memorable, I guess.
I will say, like, they work really well as Scarface's crew, right? Because Muggsy has that very, like, Al Capone, kind of feel to him. And when you're a literal puppet, you need somebody on your squad who's going to be the muscle. And Rhino does that, very well. Batman has to punch him 4 or 5 times before he falls down, you know? But as far as the designs, it's like, that's obviously Wesker, that's obviously Scarface, and once we see them with Scarface, that's obviously Rhino and Muggsy, but okay. It's about all I got.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it still looks like the Al Capone mobster. It still retains that whole look. So overall, I'd say, solid redesign, no complaints here. Not really excited, but not complaining either. So overall, pretty good. Now, the thing that this retains really well, I like that you highlighted this is very much a psychological thriller. The thing I think this retains really well is that you really feel like Wesker is really screwed up.
Yes.
This dream sequence is terrifying. He's got mutant Batman. He's got Scarface haunting him wherever he goes. I like how they kind of mix in like normal scary dream things, so we all feel like it's familiar, like the running up the stairs, or running through the park, like familiar territory. So you really relate to him, but also he's got a mutant bat that's chasing him that sounds like Scarface. So it's just overall, this guy has got some serious demons that he's still running away from.
I have very mixed feelings about the dream sequence, honestly, because I can agree with you 100%. It is wonderfully executed. Like, if we have to have a dream sequence here, this is a very, very good one. And in our next episode of this podcast, we're going to talk about a much lazier, dumber dream sequence. So keep in mind that I really like this one in its execution. I still don't actually think we need it. We know in the rest of the episode, like, we get a lot of exposition and we get a lot of Wesker's reactions to things, and he's so nervous and he's excited to be without Scarface, but also nervous about it. And then when things start happening to him, I just don't think it adds anything to the narrative. And it's not like I'm looking at another part of the episode and going, boy, I wish that part were a little longer necessarily, you know, but I'm looking at this opening dream sequence and I'm like, this is your cold open. We have no context for this episode other than this dream sequence from the beginning, and it is well executed and it's terrifying and weird and it makes sense with his psychology. But as soon as we're out of it, we get told everything we needed in what I think is a pretty organic conversational way with his psychologist, and then with Bruce Wayne and with his new landlady and all that stuff. I just, it's great as its own little vignette, but I really think the episode probably could have done without it. And this is the writing coach in me, always looking for the fat that can be trimmed, you know?
Right. What I kind of wonder, and I don't know if you disagree with this or not, but I think I totally see what you're saying. Yeah, coming into that as the opening of the episode feels kind of strange because, like you said, we learn a lot of the same information in literally the next scenes. But the thing I think maybe it would have worked better if they just introduced to him living a happy life, and we see him getting his job and moving to his new place, and then you see he's still haunted by like the visions. Even that I think would have added a little more like just story value, the positioning of it, you know, because at least you're like getting inside and you see, oh, he's still okay. We see him, he's happy. Oh no, he's still haunted underneath the exterior. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Overall, not necessary to what we find out in those second scenes.
And again, there are a lot of dream sequences in a lot of fiction that I think are bad and like wastes of time, and they're just the person who's writing it trying to do, you know, kind of clever poetic things and tease there's a lot of bad ways to do dream sequences. So I am often very negative about them broadly, you know, like in the world. It's one of the things where I'm just like, tell me about this dream sequence and start justifying yourself. And I do the same thing with prologues. You better start justifying this prologue, you know, stuff like that.
Right.
And in this case, this being the very first thing we see, it's both dream sequence and prologue. And it's very hard for the pedantic part of me not to step back and go tisk, 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 you know?
Yeah. Right. Again, excess story that we don't need, but you know, I guess it does. I guess the goal from their perspective would be obviously fill the runtime, but maybe to like just show you how screwed up this guy is. But like to your point, there are other ways to do that.
We get it later, and I think we get it better because I think that you and I can both agree that the parts of this episode that are like a psychological thriller are very well executed.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I think kind of moving on to that piece, you know, we see him he's being released from Arkham. He's a sane, credible person. The things that are most upsetting about this is when he's being triggered and he's starting to guess himself, second guess himself. Am I better? Am I healthy? Am I really hearing a voice or something going on? That's really upsetting stuff. And to see a man like Wesker who so badly wants to be well and normal and live the boring, monotonous, like everyday average life, a middle class life, seeing him being pushed into psychological disarray is very upsetting and troubling, frankly. So I think this episode does a great job with the mind games, which which your point, I think is probably just as, if not more effective and certainly more necessary to the story than the dream sequence.
And I love all of that stuff. Like Wesker, again, right there in his psychologist's office is like, it'll be weird to be out there all alone, really alone, but also good. And I was like, perfect. Like I see this already. And then he gets the phone call and we're shaking and we're dropping our glass. And I even like how we get to see him doing his job at Wayne Enterprises with like a bounce in his step. You know what I mean? Like he's doing this pretty menial task, but he's really bringing his A game to it. And he is serious about succeeding. And I like that we got that scene because then later we get one when he's harried and starting to crack and he's not as careful. And all that stuff is really good, I think. And it's also very upsetting. We talked in The Way of All Flesh about how Lex not just poisoning Corbin, but then also tricking him into this robot body, like not being clear about how some of this was going to work, was just, on top of everything else, just monumentally cruel. And if we had to look for another example of someone just being cruel and being crueler than Lex was to Corbin, I actually think Rhino and Muggsy are in the running, because trying to yank the carpet of sanity out from under someone who's just trying so hard is just, like, if you think about this from Wesker's perspective at all, it's terrifying and awful. And you already are a person who has trouble knowing what parts of your reality to believe. You know, it just breaks my heart for him.
Psychological torture. No, absolutely. And it's really upsetting. And I think, I think some of the ideas that are brought up in this episode that I find most fascinating and troubling overall is just like, it kind of goes back to that whole nature versus nurture thing. Is he inherently like psychologically broken, or is it the influences in his life that are driving him to insanity? I think this episode, again, you see kind of both sides of that. I mean, I think he is a person who has a history of being unwell, but also he has put people in his life who bring that out of him, or try to bring that out of him.
Reinforce the delusion, right? And I mean, even before this time, when they were just working together as criminals, Rhino and Muggsy weren't setting out to reinforce his delusion. They were just looking for somebody to be the brains of their operation. Now here they are switching it around to where they are, in fact, like trying to shake his sanity. And it is just, it's just heartbreaking and terrible. And Wesker's the perfect person to watch with this too, because he's such a giant ball of vulnerability outside of Scarface.
Yeah, most definitely. And a question for you. Now, I was a little fuzzy on the details for this particular episode when we were rewatching. I had seen it before. But I had a question for you, or maybe if you can't like say from personal experience on this rewatch, or just like more objectively, do you think they did a really good job at tricking the audience into thinking Scarface might be more than imagination? Because I have to admit, whenever Batman pulled up the speaker, I was like, oh, hey, I didn't remember that part about how it really was like manufactured.
This is a really interesting question. This is a really interesting question to me, Caleb, because I never thought that we were trying to be tricked, like as the audience. Like I assumed that it was a plot, but I felt for Wesker, you know what I mean? Like knowing that it was a plot, or feeling like I knew it was a plot, did not take away from my enjoyment or also my unease, with this episode, because I could feel so strongly for Wesker in his position. So that's a really interesting question to me, because I never felt like they were trying to get me, like the writers were trying to get me to go along on this. I just assumed that we were supposed to realize it was a plot. And the question became, well, who's doing it, Right. And I can't speak to this time, but I know I can remember vaguely the first time that I ever saw this episode, expecting it to be almost a third personality of Wesker's that was setting himself up. That's what I was expecting,
And that would have been nuts. That would have been really nuts.
I mean, there's not enough time for it, and I like it better how this went, because I want Wesker to come away clean. It feels important to me that Wesker comes away clean, and he doesn't if there's like a third personality, or sort of a half a Scarface, like something like Scarface manifesting itself to bring the real Scarface back, is what I was expecting originally. So I don't know. I was always expecting it to be a plot, So I don't know. Did you feel like they were trying to get you to come along on that maybe Scarface had always been separate from Wesker? Or what was your feeling as you were watching it?
Well, my thought was genuinely, it was a little bit of both. I knew that the thing that I read into it was that having Rhino and Muggsy there are obviously triggering him in a certain way. That part I bought. I was like, oh, they're triggering Scarface to come back out. I didn't realize. But what I was surprised by was how far they took it. I thought their simple presence and them constantly bugging him and trying to lure him into things. That was me saying, okay, they're triggering him. That's reactivating Scarface. But when you find out that actually, really, they were planting recordings in his apartment and stuff, I was like, wow, that is next level like manipulation.
And hiring Hips McManus to pretend to be Scarface to make a phone call. Yeah. Now, you know what? That's fair. I hadn't thought about it until you started putting it together like that. But this does seem maybe a step or two above Rhino and Muggsy's pay grade as far as thinking things through. That's a fair cop that I had not thought about. Yeah.
Well, and it came back to bite him because at the end of the episode, Scarface decided, well, listen, you guys should never have been the brains of the operation. In fact, I was intentionally hiding so that I could reveal myself when I thought was appropriate. So he tries to off them. I thought that was kind of ironic and kind of funny, honestly. Yeah,
I love it so much. I love it so much because that really does come back to the fact that there is a part of Wesker that is capable of being a cold-blooded criminal. You know, like we need to be reminded that Scarface, who's a pretty goofy concept, really, is still really dangerous. Like he gets stuff done in Gotham, and that's not easy for bad guys. You know, like the competition is fierce. And so having us reminded in that moment that Scarface is actually intensely dangerous and intensely evil, you know, was great. I really liked that bit a lot. And a little comeuppance for Muggsy and Rhino in that way it also feels like poetic justice. I loved it.
They were playing with fire or poking the bee's nest, you know? It's like, what did you guys think was going to happen? This is like a guy who has no problem murdering people and is clearly unwell. So I don't know, Again, they thought things, in some ways they thought things out well, in other ways they didn't think them out at all.
And suddenly it comes back around to where I'm like, no, never mind. That actually makes sense for Rhino and Muggsy.
And I even thought the way that Scarface went out with the fan, which, by the way, going out Child's Play 3 style, I thought was kind of funny for those of you.
Okay, wait, have you compared the release dates? Who did it first?
Oh, I haven't. I'm pretty sure Child's Play 3 did it first.
Oh, I think you're right. Child's Play 3 is 1991, which was definitely before this show.
Yep. Now that would have been cool had Child's Play stolen from Batman, but no. Overall, I thought it was still cool. But the way I found eerie about it was even when he was about to get sucked into the fan blade, like the doll without the moving lips was still talking to Wesker. You know, you could hear the voice.
Yeah.
POV, and I was like, oh man, creepy stuff. Yeah.
Wesker is deep in that thing, right? And okay, so I feel like noticing how deep Wesker's into it to the point where just before Scarface, quote unquote, dies, Wesker is still keeping up the conversation is, for me, that's a really good transition for what I like most about Batman in this episode. He is so committed to Wesker's rehabilitation.
Yes.
And I love it. I love it so much. Like, he recognizes how sick Wesker is or has been and could be again, and is just like, nah, not today. This one gets out of the game. By God, I will guardian angel him on every level, by day, by night, 9 to 5. He's in the Wayne halfway house. He's working at Wayne Enterprises, and at night, Bruce Wayne in Dracula drag is making sure that his old crew leaves him alone. This made me so happy. Happy.
No, it was great. It was great. I love how hands-on, because it just shows that outside of just the crime fighting, Batman and Bruce Wayne are both invested in the personal happiness and wellness of this person who he knows, like, Wesker's a very well-intentioned, sweet person who just has some demons he's battling, and he's like, here's how I can help, you know?
Yeah.
Again, just like the faith that humans can be better and can recover. Certainly not a Batman we see all the time, unfortunately, but it is very, very nice to see that here. I like it quite a bit.
I mean, to be fair, it's not that exciting most of the time to know that the Wayne Foundation is out helping people with halfway houses and stuff like that. So I don't expect to see it all the time, but it is really great when we get it, because it's worth reminding people who are interested, like who are willing to do a little close watch and think about this a little bit. It's worth reminding people that Bruce Wayne fights crime in a million different ways.
Yep.
All day, every day, in a bunch of different ways. And Gotham requires a response that is Batman, but Gotham also requires a response that is Bruce Wayne, and I like both of those things very much.
Absolutely. One other thing I wanted to touch on, Joshua, and this is me trying to kind of put a pin in some of the themes, both of this episode, but also like just with Scarface as a whole. I really like how I mean, obviously it's sad, but the way he relapses as a character, even after he's recovered in this episode, the thing
It's
that this
real,
says,
right?
It's real. Like the battle with mental health and mental unwellness, it's ongoing. You don't just like, it's not you fix it, you overcome it once you're done. Like it is for a lot of people, it really is an ongoing thing, no matter what the condition. And I really appreciate this through this character, they're able to explore some of that.
Yes.
In ways that are probably more nuanced than you'd expect from a show that's technically designed for children. So
yeah.
I just say kudos to them, and especially with in the 90s where we weren't talking about mental health nearly as much as we are today. I think it was pretty bold, and I think the idea that mental health and mental unwellness is a constant struggle and an ongoing battle, and also that even the strongest people need help from the outside, and it's best to accept that help, I think also sends a positive message. So kudos to them for doing that story.
Yeah, you're right about how little we were talking about mental illness in the 90s compared to now. And that from a certain perspective, making Wesker a person that we can empathize with and feel horror on behalf of, that somebody's, yanking the threads of his reality blanket, is really unexpected for the time period. But now it's wonderful. It really is great to hear. Like, we don't need to go into everything going on in the world during these trying times, because I know a lot of people go to their podcast to escape some of that. But I'll say that's really doing a number on my relatively low level generalized anxiety. And it really is like every day I'm like, okay, I did okay yesterday. How are we going to do today? Yep. And just to have that suggested, even in 22 minutes in one episode of Batman, even to suggest that to kids who might be struggling with anxiety or depression or worse, more serious things, is such a powerful message. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. So kudos to the new Batman Adventures and Bruce Timm and whoever, everyone who worked on this episode for that. I think it sends a positive message that is just as relevant today, but we're talking about a lot more in a positive light today. And even watching this episode, Joshua, I agree. Things are crazy out there, but seeing that conversation be had in the media we're consuming and the stories we're telling, I think is a huge value add, just all around. So exciting stuff.
All right, Caleb. Well, let's end this as we so often do. Give me some alternative media recommendations. So people liked this episode of Double Talk. What kinds of things could they read or watch or whatever experience that would reinforce those themes for them?
I am all about, I did 3 different movies today. One of them, Child's Play 3, I already referenced. That one's a little more on the goofy side.
It's a little on the nose, but I get it. I get it.
Less on the nose, though, and man, the timing for this could not be more perfect. I just watched the film yesterday, The Road to Perdition. It's a movie about a mobster who basically is trying to get his son out of the game. So, long story short, Tom Hanks is a mobster, and I guess this is kind of spoiler, but it's in the premise of it happens pretty early. Basically, things go south, half his family gets killed, and his whole goal, and so he realizes, oh my gosh, I've got to get out. So it's like him and his son. And basically his whole goal is to get out as cleanly as possible without his son, like getting his son out of the game before he gets into it, so to speak. Because basically like there's this entire like mob that's after them. While he's also, he's kind of like, Tom Hanks is reckoning with his sins as a former enforcer, while also trying to escape the life he lived in, set up a new life for his son to live in so that he doesn't have to, execute violent crimes. And I just got to say, long story short, I made notes for this episode a few weeks ago, and then just rewatched and actually watched the film yesterday. And it not only is an incredible film that I think is very relevant to the Scarface character in terms of just like, that kind of more classical mobster story.
Yeah,
the thing I like about it is it really is about redemption and the consequences of violence and the cyclical nature of violence that I find real interesting. But also that like there is a cost to the sins you live, but there's also a way forward as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's it was really good. I like the way they portray violence in the movie because unlike a lot of Scorsese films that I do love, sometimes those films might overplay the violence a little bit to make it look a little too cool.
Right.
This movie, the way it does it really it does not put an emphasis on I mean, the violence is a thing, but it's a thing that happens, and there's not like a cool like sequence, you know, that like or any iconic scenes of violence as much as it's about the characters reacting to it.
Absolutely.
So that's one I really like. And mentioning Scorsese, I still think, of course, master of mob films, so I don't want to speak ill. But I will say, him reckoning with how he's done violence in the past, I highly recommend you watch The Irishman, because similarly, he finds a way in this new movie to do violence in a way that is not attractive, that is not cool, and when it's like honestly kind of boring. Like people just walk up and get shot. Like there's no cool drawn out sequence. It's just people getting just killed without like any, like there's consequences, but it's not like a moment. It's just a thing that happens. It's sudden, it's quick. It's bloody, but it goes on, you know. Whereas some of his former films like Casino or Goodfellas, which again I think are fantastic films, they tend to like play it up and make it more theatrical. So I think looking at Scorsese kind of putting a bookend in his approach to mob films, at least I think he is pretty cool, because he kind of reckons with the consequences of violence, and it's more like about a film about looking back on the life as a gangster and what it cost him. So anyway, Road to Perdition, The Irishman are both on Netflix right now, so check those out. Joshua, what about you?
I have one that's really on point for this episode, but I want to tag on to The Road to Perdition. That's actually based on a comic book, and the comic book is excellent also. So if you want to experience that story in another way, you can read the Road to Perdition graphic novel. And, friends, Road to Perdition, the graphic novel, is actually based on a Japanese manga called Lone Wolf and Cub.
You don't say.
Yeah,
I gotta check that out. Check that out. Okay.
There are something like 30 volumes of very densely packed story in Lone Wolf and Cub. And the basic premise, the themes are very, very similar to Road to Perdition, but seeing it through the lens of both a Japanese culture and also the Tokugawa shogunate era is just really different. I mean, it's fascinating to me how the themes can be the same, but the way that we deal with them and look at them are so different through these cultural lenses, but they're complementary, right? So highly recommend Lone Wolf and Cub and also the graphic novel of Road to Perdition.
Awesome. Fantastic. Any other recommendations, Joshua?
Yes, this one is super duper on the nose. Tell me, Caleb, have you seen a horror film called Daniel Isn't Real?
I am familiar with Daniel Isn't Real, but I have not watched it. Tell me more.
Hot dog, I've seen a movie Caleb hasn't. Winning. Okay, so the basic premise of Daniel Isn't Real is that you have a boy at the beginning of the film. He's just a kid, and his parents are going through a hard time, and he gets an imaginary friend. He witnesses something terrible. He witnesses a killing or the aftermath of a killing. And between that and the parents, you get the feeling that he's got this imaginary friend because, you know, he's coping, right? And then the imaginary friend convinces him to do something terrible. And his mother says, you have to put him away. And the kid puts him away for like 15 years. Now, flash forward, we're in the present, you know, and that kid is grown up, or at least he's college age, right? And he's going to college. And it occurs to him that for his own mental health, he needs to confront Daniel. And so he goes to where they, air quotes, locked up Daniel and lets Daniel out. And so you spend the rest of the film trying to figure out if Daniel is his imaginary friend or if he's something more sinister or what. The question is, it should almost be Daniel Isn't Real? Question mark. It's fantastic. My son has got us on a bit of a horror film kick right now. And
Nice.
That was one of the first ones that we jumped on. I think it's a Shudder original, so you can only see it if you're a Shudder subscriber. But Shudder has a bunch of really great horror films, and it's like $5 a month. I would recommend your $5 for 1 month just to get to see Daniel Isn't Real. It's that enjoyable and tense. And I think it's real on point with this question about Wesker and Scarface.
Good stuff, Joshua. You know, that film, I think, debuted at South by Southwest last year, and it was on my short list of films I just didn't get to, but it looked really interesting. And I want to say, I might be totally off base here, I want to say it was either Tobey Maguire or Elijah Wood, or both of them were producers on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Goodness, that's more than I know. You're right. You're right. Elijah Wood. Yeah.
But it's got some talent behind the camera as well. So I think I might have to sign back up, reinstate my Shudder account just so I can watch it. So thank you for that recommend.
If you do, or if any of our listeners also sign up for Shudder just to see Daniel Isn't Real, hit me up. I've got a few other films we watched while we were subscribers that I would recommend. That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk and I am at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is animated discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, Joshua, I'm the editor-in-chief and contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis, and we publish in-depth essays from time to time on all types of films. You can find those articles, as well as our podcast, The Cinematic Schematic, at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
The links for the Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are easy to find, all in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about the Superman episode, Stolen Memories.
We'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.